Hold on tight for the next hour. You're entering into a place, a zone called the alternative to the alternative media. It's a place, a special place where even truth seekers fear to tread.
All right, people, let's move like we've got a purpose.
Affirmative.
Okay, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, people of all races, colors, and creeds, welcome back to the greatest show on earth, the Investigative Journal. I'm your host, Greg Anthony, here on FirstAmendmentRadio.com. And most of the week I've been doing shows on what I call Where Does All That Evil Come From? And we've gone through several shows and we've discussed things like certain evil locations in the world. One you may not think of, but one is Vatican Hill. We've discussed that. Then we've talked about certain evil organizations, discussing the Jesuits, the Roman cult, the Nazi SS, the Holy See, which you may or may not know. I gave you some good information. The Illuminati, and expanding on what that really means. And of course, the New World Order. So a lot of evil in places sometimes you wouldn't suspect. We've also looked at some acts of evil. And one was cultural genocide. But there's many, many others, such as mass human sacrifice, which we looked at a little bit. We're going to go deeply into that in another show. Political mass murder, cultural sabotage, slave trade, sexual human sacrifice, child molestation, murder, sexual assault, and many, many other things. We have discussed a little bit about some evil rituals, and one happens to be the blood sacrifice to goddesses. I'm going to get into that in another show and discuss also sacred cannibalism, burning human sacrifice, sacred calls to demons, sacred celibacy of priests, and the Holy Inquisition. We've heard a lot about the Holy Inquisition, so I thought I'd start with that today and maybe elaborate on it, discuss it, and show you that it's really never been denounced, although they publicly, the Vatican will say that it no longer exists, and they apologize. I think even John Paul apologized for it. But boy, I'll tell you, the Holy Inquisition still goes on today. And I bet you didn't know this, that there is an office of the Inquisition. They've changed it to the Office of Religious Works or something like that. But the head of it is the first American bishop out of San Francisco, and that's where the office is. So get ready, America. The Holy Inquisition. So let's look at that and stay tuned, because you know something? Everybody in the world has their most evil list. Who are the people that are most evil in the world? And everybody probably has a list if you started going down to it. Today, I'm going to try to get to who I call Father Joseph Stalin. Now, everybody knows Stalin, but do you know some of the background, the real background that's been hidden from you? That's what I'm going to try to get at today. The real Joseph Stalin. And let's start out with today on part 4 of Where Does All That Evil Come From? Let's start out with the Holy Inquisition. Yes, and I love the way they mention that, the Holy Inquisition. Well, it's an 800-year-old Roman Catholic tool, right? Ceremony and institution dedicated to what I call evil. Yes, there's no better way to explain it. And folks, why the Inquisition is one instance of an ecclesiastical tribunal, an institution of the Vatican, a series of historical movements. Its first and primary purpose, what is it? Was and has always been for the punishment and suppressing of heresy and elimination of infidels lawfully. So that means anybody who is going to get in the Pope's way is going to be cut off at the head, right? In the simplest definitions concerning this Inquisition, a heretic is, we hear that a lot, but it's any person who essentially believes in the sacred scriptures of Christianity, right? but refuses to yield to the absolute temporal power and moral authority of the Pope and the Pope's minions. An infidel is anyone who does not believe in the Christian philosophy. Okay? Now, the idea of the Vatican calling itself a Christian organization always bugs me, because when you really look at it, they're not. And so don't confuse yourself with that. So, as the Inquisition has really never been disbanded, nor its rules struck out, it remains the only example of lawful human sacrifice in the world today. Lawful. They believe that if it's for the better good of the Pope, that it's lawful. They have moral authority over you. So, the last time that we can really look at the legal framework of the Inquisition was used in 1940 to 1945, not too long ago, with the sacrifice of over 18 million innocent Orthodox Christians, Protestants, ethnic Jews, and other minorities by the Catholic dictators, you got to understand this, loyal to the Vatican. That includes, of course, Stalin, Hitler, etc. And we can also go to the Croatian genocide, which we've talked about on this show. As an inquisition is technically lawful. And people go, well, how can an inquisition be lawful? Well, according to the canon law and the Pope's authority and the Jesuit oaths, of course it's lawful. The sacrifice of millions of people by burning them alive in ovens cannot be legally considered murder. This is one of the major reasons no pope, cardinal, or Jesuit priest has ever been held accountable for the evils they unleashed in World War II. Did you ever wonder about that? Why Pope Pius XII was never held accountable? Why many people, many Catholic bishops loyal to this Inquisition, both in Russia, we have a Catholic bishop working in the camps in Russia, killing people. But they're never held accountable. As well as in Croatia, the Croatian genocide, in Germany, etc., etc. So we have this, idea by these people that it's lawful to do this. Now, let's get into some of the background. And I know people really think that this doesn't go on any longer and never will happen again. But please believe me that this is a tool that they'll use always. By the beginning of the Great Middle Ages, in the 1100s, the political and religious landscape also began to heat up. Out of the darkness rose voices calling for the greater rights for individuals. That's a no-no. You better believe it. For the Vatican, and for an end to the bonded Catholic slavery of serfdom. The key driver of this change going way back was the reemergence of education, along with trade that began to fill European cities and noble courts with all sorts of new ideas. As a result, popes such as Pope Lucius III in 1181 to 1185 experienced a reign of turmoil against increasingly emboldened royal families against the Holy Mother Church in Rome. The double-edged sword of granting letters patent to noble families to rule certain countries was that these kings, queens, and emperors had in turn started to develop their own public and private laws. The legal might of the Catholic Church was being tested. Now, contrary to the revisionist historians who support the papal view of the world, and there's no other way to put it, the practice of human sacrifice by public execution dropped dramatically through the 1100s. The risk to the Church, if ever nations rose up and forbid state-sanctioned murder and denounced the Vatican's forgeries of claims over temporal and moral authority, would be nothing short of the collapse back then of the Church. So the Inquisition was thoroughly an evil mechanism designed to protect the claimed temporal and moral authority of Rome, of the Catholic Church, by taking advantage of the statutes of Emperor Justinian, for which we even get the word justice, that legally placed the church above the laws of civilized society. Thus, ecclesiastical law, the laws of the church, became extremely important, as technically they were legally the first laws of the world. Okay? Okay, let me just take an aside here and try to maybe make this palatable for what's going on today. And let's use the impeachment inquiries and all of what's going on in Washington as an example. Now, no one will doubt what I say, that socialism is on the minds of the Democratic Party. And many in Congress are pushing, many of the presidential candidates are pushing for socialism. And in turn, you're seeing them openly talk about taking away many of the constitutional rights that you enjoy in this country. Right now, there's a big, huge rally that's going to be held in Virginia over the weekend, and I believe on Monday. And people who are wanting to protect the Second Amendment are going there because Virginia wants to pass certain laws that's going to ban guns, ban gun ranges. It's an amazing thing. Basically, usurp the Constitution, take away your rights, and guess what? Who's doing this? You're getting this push by the liberal, socialist, now Democratic Party, who basically want to strip you of your rights. Now, I told you a long time ago that socialism was a creation of the Vatican Jesuits back in the 1600s in the Paraguay experiments, and they've pushed this idea of socialism into communism, etc., and they're the creators of this. So you got to know they're behind this. And what's the reason for being behind it? They want to take away the rights of people because you know their political choice, their political system of choice is fascism, and socialism leads to that. Just look at Venezuela. It's an example. And ask yourself, why hasn't the United States helped Venezuela? It's forgotten about, right? Because there is going to be a push to strip you of your rights in this country. And guess what? The people at the top are going to use this same justification because they are first and foremost loyal to not the Constitution of the United States, but to this temporal and moral authority that we've talked about in this Holy Inquisition. Exactly the same thing. Now, well, how do I know that? Well, look at what they've done with our justice system in front of in plain view. They have basically ran roughshod over the Constitution, and you're seeing that many of the people that are claiming that Trump and others on, of course, the America First side have violated certain laws. What is totally being ignored are all the laws that have been violated openly by this organization, by the socialist, let's call it the Clinton organization. Nothing is ever done, and American people see it and they go, well, what is going on here? Well, this is what's going on. They believe they have the moral authority over you to do whatever they want because their laws are justified by the moral and the temporal laws that the Pope and canon law dictate. So they, in their minds, are justified. The ends justifies the means. That's why, when this country was formed, it wasn't formed just to protect all of us. It was formed to get the Vatican Jesuits into this country so that they could do this. So the ecclesiastical laws, although you don't hear it, in canon law, are much more important to these people than our own Constitution. And that's why you're seeing this travesty of justice. That's why you're seeing commentators say, oh, there's a two-tier justice system. It appears the Democrats get away with murder, and anybody that's basically standing up for the Constitution is getting screwed. So they're showing it to you in plain view. So let's go back to what was going on hundreds of years ago that leads up to today, because like I said, they don't change. Now, while we go back to Pope Lucius here, the third, He was the first really to establish the Inquisition through a papal bull as the legal and moral framework for human sacrifice and barbaric torture of innocent people. It was Pope Innocent III in 1198 to 1216 who put it really into effect, the key elements being the laws of the church, the inquisitor, the accused, the act, the offense, the tribunal, and the witness. Now, think about this. What has the Democrats done with this impeachment? They have a guy named Adam Schiff, who basically is the inquisitor. He's been the one who is accused. He's handled every element of this. He's not given due process to anyone on the Republican side. And basically is usurping every idea of American law. But why? I believe he is loyal to this same moral and temporal authority that overlooks and oversees this country, basically. And the Constitution is basically there as a sham for you to believe in, but for them to trample on. Now, the Inquisitor, let's call it Schiff, strictly speaking, was special but a permanent judge, acting in the name of the Pope and clothed by him with the right and the duty to deal legally with offenses against the faith, adhering to the canon laws of the Church. Thus, with the spectrum of enforcing church law, the Inquisitor, and still has, the legal power over life and death of the accused. Interesting. Now, next, the accused was, back then, to be summoned to appear before the Inquisitor, right? The accused does not actually have to be charged with a crime of heresy at this point. Now look at Trump. What are you hearing in the news? He is being impeached and charged with it. Now, whether you like him or not, and all of you people in Hollywood, listen up, and all you people that follow the Democratic Socialist Party, listen up. Although you don't like him, and you may not like his policies, he is being impeached without a crime being committed. There is no crime. There's not a federal crime. There's not any bribery. There's not anything in the impeachment laws that have been written years ago that merit this, but yet he is being impeached. And it's almost as if the Inquisitor is there doing it, because basically he's being charged. He's not been charged with a crime, but he's basically being charged with political heresy, right? Because they don't like him. They don't like his policies, and they don't like that 63 million people voted. They want to get rid of him. What's the difference? Once their name is written down on a piece of paper, or going back to the 1100s, and the individual acknowledged themselves to be that person, they ceased to legally be a person. Instead became both a legal personality and property. Just the simple act of acknowledging themselves to be who they are. So we're looking back at the Inquisition. These people did not want to follow papal Rome, so they admitted it, but they became then not a person, but they became the property of Rome. Just the simple act of acknowledging themselves to be who they are in front of this Inquisitor was enough for him to legally have complete control over their destiny. Now, listen to this. So we have, I'm using a political analogy here, but let's say we have Adam Schiff, who is the guy who's pushing this illegal impeachment. He is accusing our president, and whether you like him or not, that's the way it is. He's accusing him of being who he is, no crimes, and for this, they want to have complete control of his destiny and our destiny, and people who voted for him. Right? So they're saying, the hell with the Constitution, the hell with the law. We have a moral obligation. We're representing a higher power, someone who has temporal control over you. And who is that? The Pope in Rome. And that Holy Inquisition that they've been carrying out for thousands of years, hundreds of years. Now, charges, hey, they could be drafted later if required. We don't care. We don't need that. Isn't that similar to what they did in this impeachment? I mean, they just wrote, if you could take this impeachment, I looked at all the charges. There's no laws broken. You could write it on a piece of paper in 3 words, and you'd say, well, what? But they can be summoned to appear. Now, what are they doing? They're going to be appearing. There's going to be a big trial in the Senate. I mean, if this was in a regular court, it would be thrown out like in 60 minutes. There's nothing here. But the accused does not actually have to be charged with the crime of heresy at this point. Nothing. Once their name is written down, and they did that because they brought the judge in, remember? The Supreme Court Justice just the other day. And they mentioned Donald John Trump being impeached. And then, it's priceless. But anyway, the accused does not actually have to be charged. Now, once their name is written down and the individual acknowledged themselves to be that person, they're ceased, I guess, to be legally a person. And instead, like I said, became property. Just the simple act of acknowledging themselves was enough. Charges could then be drafted later. Heck with the charges. We don't need anything. We don't need a law to be broken. Hell, you had Nancy Pelosi. Boy, she's a real trip these days, isn't it? I mean, can you imagine the 3rd most powerful person in the world? She can't even talk anymore. I mean, this woman doesn't belong in that position, put it that way. But anyway, that's what our country's come down to. And she had the audacity to say they should get a special prosecutor because they got some new witness. I mean, she has no idea what the laws are even, and doesn't care. But more often than not, the person would be tortured until some kind of confession of some crime was obtained. In later centuries, most notably, the fictitious tales of witches and magic promoted the church and then used to snare innocent people of intelligence. Okay, so there was some statements made yesterday by some senators saying, man, if we've got to listen to this impeachment stuff for 2 weeks, we're going to go crazy. It's the same thing. They're just beating this thing over the head. They're over your head, and there is no legal justification for it. But they believe they have a moral justification, just like the Pope believes he has a moral justification to kill people because they don't follow him, and it's not a crime. That's what's really interesting. So, what about this? We talk about the Spanish Inquisition. Well, I want to make an analogy here because I've said this many times, and people ask me, well, what are their goals? You've been a Catholic your whole life. You studied them. You lived there. You worked hard to understand. I said their main goal is to control your mind, body, and soul, even after you die. And you say, well, how can that be? Well, they believe it. And the Inquisition, in the Spanish Inquisition, took an added evil dimension. Under the Spanish Inquisition 2 centuries after Pope Innocent, with the introduction of the public ritual of cursing and damning the souls of being sacrificed by repeating their names, their crimes, and their ritual of exorcism. Far from being a misguided Christian act, this ritual was the very deliberate embodiment of necromancy and black magic in the control of the souls of the recently departed by condemning them to eternal service to the priests and church. Okay. The largest example of the Catholic Church ever condemning souls to itself in this manner was the 18 million sacrificed in the Catholic sacrifice camps. And let me go to that right after the break during World War II. I think you'll find it fascinating, if not sickening. Incredible. That this stuff is allowed to go on behind the scenes and no one really gives a damn. Back in 3 minutes on the Investigative Journal.
The book of Revelation says, the spirit of prophecy is the testimony of Jesus Christ. This is at the very heart of FirstAmendmentRadio.com. In that spirit, we have created the Prophecy Reality News app for all of your mobile devices, streaming First Amendment Radio 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Available for your Apple, Android device, and smartphone, absolutely free. Get the Prophecy Reality News app installed today. so you can listen to First Amendment Radio wherever you are. The Prophecy Reality News app. Get it now.
Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of Nicholas Arthur's new book titled When the Third Temple is Built. That's crosstheborder.org. When it comes to prophecy today, much of the evangelical Christian world has their eyes on Israel, waiting and watching to see when the third temple will begin to be built. The plans are drawn, the Jewish people are eager. Most evangelical Christians today believe that the rapture will happen before the third temple is built. Hi, I'm Michael Eugene. I was taught that Daniel's 70th week was in the future. Is that really what the Bible teaches? Have we searched the scriptures and found this to be true? Why is it so important for a re-established Israel to build a third temple in Jerusalem? Is it necessary to build a temple on the same location already occupied by the Dome of the Rock? Is it necessary for sacrifices to take place in the temple on Temple Mount? Is there really a rapture followed by 7 years of tribulation? What is the New Testament temple? Can we identify history and prophecy? Who is the first beast in Revelation chapter 13? Who are the 7 kings in Revelation 17? I have asked all these questions, and I have found Nicholas Arthur's new book, When the Third Temple is Built, answers all these questions and more using Scripture to interpret Scripture. The Bible says that no prophecy of Scripture is of any private interpretation. Nicholas shows us in his new book, When the Third Temple is Built, how the Bible interprets prophecy and not man's private interpretation. Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of Nicholas Arthur's new book titled When the Third Temple is Built. That's crosstheborder.org.
The following program is labeled dangerous and off limits by the supreme Jesuit command. But stand tall, people. Listen up, and you may just learn something.
Oh, dear Lord Jesus, this ain't happening, man. This can't be happening, man. This isn't happening.
Okay, we're back for the second half hour of the Investigative Journal. Greg Anthony here, and we're going over part 4 of where does all this evil come from? And I wanted to get today to, we've been discussing the Holy Inquisition, and we've now gotten to the Holocaust. We've gotten to this, what was going on between 1940 and 1945. Now, I got this information from an insider that had a family that was very high up in the Jesuit order. And he claims, and if you start looking at this, and I've looked at this before, again, there is a pentagram of supreme evil. You know the importance of a pentagram that can be formed by the precise, true geographic locations of the worst Nazi SS human sacrifice camps of World War II. Now, these were in Poland, and this may strike people as conspiracy theory, but bear with me. This same notion as those who would see religious symbols in simple pieces of toast or clouds, that's not what I'm talking about. You just look at what this man told me and what he's written about. Yet the pentagram, he said, is able to be drawn, and its precise center of power is an actual temple dedicated to Cybele, otherwise known as Ishtar, the most ancient goddess whose most sacred site is Vatican Hill. So it is not something that can be discounted entirely. Logic is a critical tool in the search for truth. Now, what is mere fable and sometimes wild slander, and what makes common sense sound reasonable and probable? But what is even more important than a logical perspective is a respectful one. Remember this, when anyone mentions World War II and the slaughter of innocents by the Roman Catholic dictators and their allies, there's an unprecedented amount of evil here. Therefore, utmost care must be given to respecting the memory and the surviving families. And basically, any claims need to be provable, unquestionably factual, and not reckless or unfounded. Now, To answer any outstanding doubt concerning the complete involvement of the Roman Catholic Church through Pope Pius XII and the Jesuit Superior General Vladimir Ledikowski, we have to look at additional evidence concerning this pentagram, this satanic religious nature of sacrificing over 18 million people. That may come as a surprise to many people, but there is a motive. An obvious and possibly still not satisfactorily answered questions to many readers and listeners is not so much why, but the underlying motives again of people claimed to be so wholly evil, acting as if they're so good. Why would they murder all these people, 18 million non-Catholics, in ovens? Like any crime, once motive can be established without question, then the likely complicity in the crime narrows and disappears a little bit, given the remaining evidence. So unless the Satanists that we call Pope Pius XII and Ledikowski, along with other hardliners, had some pressing and urgent need, the motive for such wholesale slaughter would seem less credible. But when they could possibly be an urgent and pressing motive for ancient Satanists to go to the expense, and risk of sacrificing so many people, the answer lies in the true author of the most famous prophecy of the Roman Catholic Church. And let's look at this. Saint Molokai, now frequently misspelled as Malachi, pronounced Molokai, Molochy, is regarded as the foremost prophet of the Roman Catholic Church. St. Malachi, we are told, he comes from Ireland and was a bishop of Armagh between 1094 and 1148. Later, we are told, he was the first Irishman to be made a saint by Pope Clement III on July 6, 1199. Further, his life is claimed to have been chronicled by no less than claimed contemporary Catholic priest historian Bernard of Clairvaux. But what makes Molokai special is not so much anything within his life, but the specific and detailed prophecy attributed to him, commonly known as the prophecy of the popes. St. Molokai was said to have received a special detailed vision of the coming 112 popes that would reign beginning with Pope Celestine II and ending with the 112th pope who witnessed the destruction of the Roman Catholic Church. No other prophecy in the history of the Catholic Church has been more personal to the Satanist papal families that have fought for centuries over the throne of St. Peter. No other prophecy has been more validated by its unprecedented accuracy to popes of history and even recent events. What makes the prophecy even more interesting is that we have reached, by its calculation, 101 or 112, the second last or the last popes of the 800-year-old prophecy. So who really was Malachi? And did he really exist? For many respectable scholars, the answer is that St. Malachi is much more likely a historical fiction, invented in the early 13th century and attributed to a historic figure. The problem, however, is how to explain the supernatural accuracy of the prophecy to date. If it was a fraud, then it would have to be the work of some dark genius. In fact, a historic figure does not exist in the form of Pope Honorius III, considered the greatest black arts magician of the 13th century. It was Honorius who invented modern and ancient black magic when he published the first history, the infamous Grimoire of Honorius the Great, the mother of all black magic books. Unlike some modern Satanist groups that seek to worship names like Satan or the devil, Pope Honorius wrote Moloch, the most ancient dark god of the Phoenicians, the Sadducees, and the Satanists. Moloch, the god of eternal fire and damnation, from where we get the word immolate, to literally sacrifice people by fire. In a deliberate twist, it is far more likely that the figure St. Malachi is none other than Moloch himself, the manifestation of pure evil, through the medium of black magician Pope Honorius, provided us with this prophecy. It explains why the prophecy remains the foremost and respected prophecy of Satanists within the Roman Catholic Church for 800 years. It also explains why the beginning of the 20th century might have seen a desperate urgency by the Vatican Satanist leadership to somehow extend the prophecy or at least some new insight. From the perspective of the evil mind of a supremely powerful Vatican Satanist in World War II, controlling in their hands the lives of millions of souls, the sacrifice of a few million to get a new message from Moloch is more than enough motive to have created the final solution by Pope Pius XII and the Jesuits. Is it a matter of logic for them, a logic that is not understood by people? If all that is claimed so far is true, and the Vatican Jesuit Satanists created the single largest pentagram of evil in history, using the Nazi SS death camps in World War II to channel this negative energy, there should surely be more hard proof. A pentagram is, after all, a shape that can be drawn with a wide degree of difference. What is to say one shape is true or another? It is frequently why it is the case that any mention of a black magic pentagram being spotted out of past evil acts is initially viewed with a high degree of skepticism. Using logic, then, let us hypothetically try to think in the minds of supremely evil men running the Catholic Church in the lead up to the unleashing of World War II. Is the pentagram all there is? In a practical sense, how would all the negative energy created through the sacrifice of millions somehow get to the center like Rome? The answer rests in the concept of ley lines. Now, ley lines of spiritual power. It has been believed for millennia that just as the earth possessed electromagnetic lines, that there also exist spiritual lines of energy, or ley lines. The same belief exists with the most ancient and powerful of Vatican and Jesuit Satanists, hence the use of geometric systems of power. Therefore, if the pentagram is to be believed the work of Pope Pius XII, the hardline Satanists of the Curia and the Jesuits, then the ley line should be a masterpiece of evil, unrivaled in the attempt to channel negative energy, connecting all the major favored satanic centers at the time in the 1930s. The ley lines formed by the shape of the great pentagram of evil would be powerful channels of negative energy, according to them. So ideally, the Jesuits would have wanted these channels to pass as close to each key satanic center as possible. Naturally, you would expect to see Berlin as well as Rome on a ley line of evil energy. Similarly, if Joseph Stalin really was an evil Jesuit priest, masking as a dictator, then a key ley line of evil energy should pass near or on Moscow. Similarly, key Catholic centers at the time, such as Croatia, Romania, should be near ley lines, and even Bordeaux, and a center of Catholic French Vichy state at the very least. The only problem about such a plan to create a superhighway of evil energy feeding the network of the Vatican-led Satanists is such a design would require extreme geometric precision, leaving a likelihood that any pentagram could be proven to exist based on the death camps that also had such ley lines of extreme power is impossible to be dismissed as a coincidence. As it turns out, this is precisely the power and precision of the great Vatican Jesuit pentagram of evil, the creation of a network of massive energy connecting the major satanic centers at the time of this unprecedented evil. And you can see by taking this, I'm looking at what this man put together, a great Vatican Jesuit ley line of evil running, and you'd have to take a look at this, and I'll give you just a basic rundown of what he's talking about. Now, we're looking for a motive, because people always ask me, why are these people so, who do they worship? What is this evil they worship? What is their motive? Well, it goes back to these ancient worshiping of the gods and these ancient black magic that we're talking about, to spread evil throughout the world. What do you think there's so many wars for, and people dying all the time at the hand of these people? The orchestration of all these revolutions by the same people we're talking about. Now, the ley line of evil running northeast to southwest from Treblinka, one of the bigger camps in Poland, Jesuit sacrifice camp, south to Auschwitz, Vatican Jesuit camp, connects St. Petersburg through the outskirts of Zagreb and through the heart of Rome to the ancient ruins of Carthage. So you got to draw that line across the flat map, and that's what you get. Now you can go to the evil running northwest through Treblinka, and I can go on and on and on, and I will refer you to this map and put it on my website so you can take a look at it and draw your own conclusions. But I wouldn't put anything past these people. Now, it's mentioned that if these ley lines that you can look at going through these cities, and their shape of the pentagram is even changed 1 degree of latitude or longitude, the ley lines have no meaning. It is only when the Nazi death camps that form the pentagram at the center of this are placed exactly as they were historically located that the pentagram really has any power for them. For those still unconvinced, there is yet one more piece of the puzzle: the specific and unique designs of the human sacrifice camps around the pentagram. There's a strange, unique architecture of each sacrifice camp that's very rarely talked about. One of the lasting anomalies, unique to all of the camps of the pentagram, yet uncommon to most of the fabricated death and labor camps of the Nazis, were their geometric layout, not the building, but the shapes formed by clusters of buildings and fences. Many arguments have been used to explain this anomaly, the most common being that the camps like Auschwitz simply grew into the size and shape because the Nazis didn't plan on so many victims. But a quick review of any of the general labor camps puts such answers as deliberately misleading, as the Nazi SS employed ruthless and precise efficiency in virtually all of its temporary and prefabricated structures, except, it seems, the human sacrifice camps of the Holocaust, most notably of the pentagram. Another excuse given is that certain camps simply had to accommodate the surrounding geography of the land. This is true for every camp built across key established infrastructure, hills and valleys. However, such excuses forget to mention that the Nazis chose to build the camps there, not 1 mile left or right, which would have made their construction cheaper in some cases. The Nazis deliberately set up camps on difficult terrain. Why? The answer is breathtakingly simple. If you're going to sacrifice innocent people to an ancient satanic god, then the place in which this evil act is done should ideally be a temple. Correct? Why do you think Vatican set their Vatican City up on a holy satanic temple? That doesn't make sense if they're a Christian organization, but they did, and people don't care. Just like they don't even care if the obelisk is there. That's not a religious symbol of Christianity. It's a worship to the gods. An Isis worshiping the penis of her slain husband. Anyone. Okay. Now, if you look at the surveying projects of the SS, anyone who has seen, let's look at an Indiana Jones movie, knows that the Nazis were obsessed in obscure ancient temple sites of power. The SS undertook the greatest surveying and blueprint maps of the ancient temple sites by any group since Napoleon. Now, who did they say the Nazis, and what did Hitler say? Who did he structure his organization regarding the Jesuits and the Vatican? The SS extensively surveyed ancient sites in Africa, in the Middle East, and Asia and Africa. In the movies, the SS are displayed as digging for buried symbols of power. This is deliberately misleading. The Nazis were civil engineers. Why then go to the extent of surveying ancient sites such as Baalbek, the first and most important home to Moloch? The ancient human sacrifice temples of the Vatican Jesuit pentagram of evil. Let's look at them. If Himmler physically ordered his engineers to build these sacrifice camps as replicas of ancient temple sites, then in short time their real purpose and satanic nature would have been immediately obvious. We would all be reading now how the Nazis built Auschwitz as a floor pan replica of Baalbek, to deliberately make the camp a physical temple of sacrifice. Instead, what we read and hear is that the physical design of the camps is of no historical importance. Yet consider for the moment the following comparisons, starting with Treblinka, which should be called the Vatican Human Sacrifice Temple Complex, at the top of this pentagram. Here you have a camp not designed as a rectangle, as so many have incorrectly stated, but a shape more resembling the key temple complex of the ancient city of Ur. Moving southeast to the next point of Jesuit Vatican temple, we come to Sobibor. This is another camp, sacrifice camp, which reflected the essential design and location of key satanic temples of the ancient Babylon. Traveling further south, we come to Januszka, another sacrifice temple complex, which design closely resembled the ancient temple of Jerusalem during the days of the Sadducees. Now traveling west, we come to the vast Auschwitz Vatican Human Sacrifice Complex, which resembles the greatest of all ancient satanic temple complexes, the Temple of Baalbek, the home of Moloch. The only Vatican Human Sacrifice Temple complex for which we cannot make a comparison is Lodz, the only one of the Vatican temples dedicated. Did anybody ever remember this? Lodz, L-O-D-Z in Poland, was dedicated to sacrificing children. Given the sacrifice of children is a historic trait of Cybele, and the Vatican is headquarters for the most ancient cult, then it is safe to assume that Lodz would have almost been a replica in some way to the temple related to the manifestation of the goddess. The fact that the temple complex was immediately torn down to its foundations, so absolutely no record of its original geometric design can be found, is very telling. The camps of the pentagram are without question designed to be spiritual replicas of ancient temples to satanic gods of the Vatican. Now, the obsessive and expensive surveying effort of the SS under Himmler makes perfect sense. The information was used to design the layout for the most important of camps. Making greater sense of this pentagram of evil, now the position of these camps as spiritual and scale models of replicas of ancient satanic temples makes sense to their precise placement. The pentagram, the replica of the temple to be built, and the terrain dictated the location of the human camps as temples themselves. If this information is wrong, then why the pentagram? Why the Temple of Cybele at the center? Why the perfect matches of each camp design to the most important of ancient temples? Now, to be clear, the Nazis built most of their prefabricated camps like rectangular boxes. But for the particular camps that I've just mentioned, they chose locations far less optimum than others, built weird and unique designs unlike any other camp, costing more time and effort. Why? There is simply too much to be dismissed as an uncanny array of coincidences. Can such a clear, satanic, and religious plan be continued to be pinned on the Nazis and they alone? Or will people finally accept this evidence being shown by millions of innocent victims of the Holocaust? They died, folks. Listen, this is something that people will not admit. They died for a religious, not a political reason. They died because of a deliberate satanic plan. They died to the gods of Moloch and Cybele, mostly by being burnt alive. They died because the Vatican elite and Pope Pius XII and Jesuit General Father Ledikowski ushered in a holy Inquisition against heretics and infidels hidden in the midst of World War II. Given the same people who did this deed remain above the law, isn't it time that we begin questioning these motives of these people in making the world a better place? For the sake of the memory of those who died? We owe them the respect to wake up to the truth, to at least put this on the table and discuss it when we have solid evidence that the Vatican backed Hitler and many other things that we brought, and Ledikowski was also behind the Nazi movement. But the question, the long-standing question that's always asked me is, what is their motive? Why would they do this? Well, here's an example. Because we know that they still worship these ancient gods. They still worship the satanic path. And no one believes it. Now, let me tell you something. You can read a lot of things. You can believe a lot of things. Don't believe it. Just take it as one more piece of information to look into. And I tell you, I remember when I was in Rome, I saw and heard from people firsthand about satanic worshiping in the Vatican. Back Monday to talk a little bit about that. Have a good weekend.
The book of Revelation says, the spirit of prophecy is the testimony of Jesus Christ. This is at the very heart of FirstAmendmentRadio.com. In that spirit, we have created the Prophecy Reality News app for all of your mobile devices, streaming First Amendment Radio 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Available for your Apple, Android device, and smartphone, absolutely free. Get the Prophecy Reality News app installed today so you can listen to First Amendment Radio wherever you are. The Prophecy.
Since the beginning of time, kings have sought it, nations have fought for it. It has been traded, it has been borrowed, it has been purchased, it has been stolen. There's a reason for it. To secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity. Invest with the security of gold and silver. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188 or visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net. Listen to Financial Survival with your host Melody Cedarstrom right here on FirstAmendmentRadio.com at 4 p.m. Eastern or 1 p.m. Pacific Time. Visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net or call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free 1-800-375-4188.